Hello, and welcome to Cry Havoc Wargaming, dedicated to bringing you the uncommon. For those of you who haven't met me, my name is Ron, and today we're going to do an unboxing video of fantasy skirmish gaming from 7TV. So let's get started. I've been a fan of Crooked Dice's 7TV for quite some time now. I wasn't planning on getting fantasy. I wasn't really sure that I needed another fantasy game. But then I saw a YouTube channel video, I think it was Crooked Dice's channel, on the game. And I got to tell you, I bought it because it's pretty. It's one of the most beautiful games I've seen. The artwork, some of the products alongside of it. It's basically the same rule system that I'm already familiar with, but in most cases, all of the products within it are just a little flashier and a little more fantasy-oriented than the original game. So I went ahead and bought it, thinking, well, I've got some figures. I'll find a way to make it work, and I'm really pleased. I'm glad I did that. I kind of cheated. I have opened this box. I couldn't wait to do this video, but I haven't opened all the components yet. So some of these things I'll be seeing with you for the first time. Let me first show you what I meant by that artwork. Here's the box cover itself there. But that's Ursa there in the middle, their Barbarian Queen series, or their Barbarian cast. As long as I'm making this video, I'm going to mention that. On the 13th day of this month, today is the 3rd, the day I'm actually taping this, but on the 13th day of September, they're going to be selling the first of their packages, cast packages for this game, and it is going to be hers with the figure that you see there on that box. The box art is phenomenal. Also, this is another one of their games that they have done alongside of Edge Hill University Press. That is something else that really impresses me with Crooked Dice. They did this with, I don't think they did it with Pulp, if I remember right, but they did do it with Apocalypse. And that is that they've worked alongside with this university as a student project with college students to help further their education. And I just think that's brilliant. I love the fact that you're developing skills and developing young people, some of whom may be in gaming, though I bet a lot of them are also studying just graphic arts design and other things. But still, what a great project and what a great way to give back to your community. So like a lot of their things, it comes with 3 books to describe the game and its rules. Let's get the producer's guide first, I think. This is the producer's guide. The producer's guide basically explains the meta of the game. For those of you who aren't familiar with 7TV, perhaps the most unusual part of the game, in most games you're in the reality of the game. If you're playing a fantasy game, if you're playing, dare I say it, and put myself at risk of being sued, Warhammer fantasy battles, or now Age of Sigmar, the concept is your little figures moving around the table are actually in that world of Age of Sigmar, and they're really living out their little orcish lives to their best orcish abilities. That's the way almost every game works, whether it is a fantasy game or whether it's the Wehrmacht somewhere in Russia in '43. This game is entirely different than that. This game is actually supposed to be fictional. The very first one, 7TV, was built around a television station, a fictional television station called 7TV that was in the 60s and 70s supposedly producing various science fiction and spy films or low-budget television shows. And that's what they've carried throughout the game. So in this particular one, the concept isn't that you're actually these heroes, but rather you're involved in an episode of a TV show about these heroes, or you're in one of the movies of an epic trilogy. The producer's guide talks about some of the main storylines that they've created. They always produce a few casts and show ideas that you can build around, but you're also completely free, and we'll talk about that as we go through this video on how that is and how easy it is to do. But you're also free to build your own television shows. But there's the Once and Future Queen, and there's a whole article like this is real about the woman I showed you on the front, Ursa, who is basically a female Conan, but in the ice and snow. In this world, again, every one of theirs is built around a particular studio. The first one, like I said, was 7TV. This one is a female Italian woman living in England by the name of Donatello Di Lorenzo, is the producer of most of these shows. And so it's all built around this fluff. There's an awful lot of fluff in the game, which isn't really instrumental to the game. But as you'll see as we go on, the idea that it isn't real is a little bit instrumental to the game. It talks a little bit about how to set up a game. There's a section here, the prologue, that's picking your playing area. They have different rules for playing different table sizes, for choosing which chapter. Chapter is what they call a game in this particular set of rules. They've changed those a little bit. Sometimes it's a chapter, sometimes it's an episode, to try to fill the genre better. So the chapters, those are the actual shows itself, or the game itself. The epilogue, that's your after game things. As you can see, all of the terms they use are based around that. And in these last sections, there's a section on some guidelines. They give you some of the fictional episodes that were supposedly produced to give you an idea of what you might do with it and how to do the shows. And there's an example of a few of the different genres. I may have started with the wrong book by going to the producer's guide first. Minerva. Minerva is the name of this production company. Curse of the Cannibal, that is based on their Norse show, Norse fantasy. Dark Fortress is a sort of world beyond imagination. It's a mixture of science fiction, fantasy thing. Not that familiar with all these, by the way, yet. Gorgon is typical mythos, Greek sort of storyline. The Great Maze is kind of like a D&D game. It's these guys moving around in a labyrinth collecting treasures. Also, the Avengers, the show I was talking about, what they're working on now. There's the Monkey King, which is Chinese. So there's a wide breakdown of what they're calling fantasy and different things. And that's just in the stuff that they've pre-prepared here. Robin Hood. This is just in the stuff that they've pre-prepared. And like I said, you can go with it where you want. So that's the producer's guide, which basically describes that aspect. It tells you how to set up a game, how to play the game. The director's guide is the rules. So the director's guide, again, it talks a little bit about the meta in the first. It talks about that premise of the difference between 7TV and other games. It gives a couple pages on what this means for you as a player and how to set things up. And then it's the basic games. And the rules and all of their games are pretty interchangeable. They just change a couple things to make them fit the genres better from book to book. I'm getting into a lot of detail for what's supposed to be a box opening. Like any of their work, there's good photographs and art of figures. Sometimes they're figures, sometimes not. The rules are pretty easy. They're not that hard to figure out. They're different than any other game you will have played, so you are going to want to go through these. But once you get them down, they're pretty easy to follow. You don't actually have to go into the book a whole lot. But the director's guide is basically the rules. The next is the casting guide. That's not spell casting. That, again, it's a TV show or movie. So casting is how you pick your characters. And this game comes with what they're going to call central casting. So your characters that are in here aren't going to be people like that Orsa I showed you won't be a character in this game, I don't think. I'll be surprised if we find her in the box. Instead, what she'll be is a card that'll be like Barbarian Queen or something. So it gives character types and the stats that are for those types. When that other game comes out on the 13th, I suspect it'll have character-specific cards for the characters in that cast. That's usually how they work. But this tells you how to create your casts. It tells you about the different genres. I was kind of getting at that in a confusing way earlier, so I stopped. But the genres in this game, the different genres of fantasy they're covering, are epic fantasy. They describe it as darkness rising from an ageless evil waking again. Epic fantasy is like Jackson's, or for that matter, Tolkien's, Lord of the Rings. Big world-shattering evil being taken down by a friendship of powerful fantasy figures. Traditional high fantasy. Folktales. This is something I didn't expect that I think is kind of interesting. And they have a series in here for being Snow White. But they have the idea of just playing out folktales or like Disney movies. Did not see that coming, and I think that's kind of a clever idea. Historical fantasy. That might include the Monkey King and in the Chinese culture, it could be King Arthur. They mentioned Robin Hood. So that's going to be fantasy based more in Earth, in our actual history to some degree. Mythic fantasy. This is the idea of legends of heroes come and go, defying gods and monsters alike. This is the Greek mythos. And that makes sense. Crooked Dice originally, as I understand it, came from doing games based around playing Sinbad or Jason and the Argonauts. So that's all very, very fitting. A pen and paper fantasy. D&D. And this game is clearly inspired by D&D. It's not D&D, it's not a role-playing game, but you can see a lot of connections there. In fact, one of the books, the encounter guide, I'm sure that comes from the idea of the wandering encounter from D&D. There's actually one of the photographs in the book is from one of the old covers of the AD&D books back in the old days in my youth. And then Sword and Sorcery, journeys through forgotten tombs, Atlantean ruins, spider-haunted cities, barbarian warrior stuff. A lot of the typical. Then this will go on and describe the different stars and co-stars, the villainous stars and co-stars. Everybody's either a hero or a villain, and what some of those options are. These are going to be the basic cards that come in the central casting. Some description of some of the skills and things. And then there's a section in the back for customizing in case you do want to make your own personalized ones. And the same sort of thing they'll do with their own books when they come out. There's a description of the special effects. Those are certain advantages that typically heroes and co-stars, stars I should say, that stars and co-stars have. So that basically just describes that. And those three things together are the basic rules. It comes with a set of dice. There's 2 colors here. In mine, it's purple and black. I don't know if that'll always be the same. I'm not really sure why there's 2 sets of colors. It may be that there's enough dice for both sides. They may have some other function in the game that I do not know. The templates are well worth looking at. These templates are, I believe they're cardstock, I think, they may actually be MDF. But they are heavy duty, they're well put together, and they're fully painted. They're very, very well done. This is part of what I meant when I talk about the beauty. It was part of this that attracted to me. In fact, let me go ahead and take a look at all the templates. There's a typical flame sort of template, like in many games. This is the barrier template. And there's a 3-inch round template. And then what is that, a 4-inch, I guess, template. And then I don't know what all the templates do yet because I haven't read the rules, or I haven't completed reading the rules. But those are the various templates. These are very, very nice quality. Very, very well produced. I think this box was a little bit more than their other box sets, and their box sets are not inexpensive, particularly not if you're here in America. But the quality just really shines in this. Here's something they did that I thought is kind of cool. These are your magic spells, and I have no idea how magic works in the game yet. Magic is new for this box, but what they clearly have are little grimoires. These are done with nice-looking little artistic, magically-looking books, and there's a list of spells and the rules regarding the spells in each one. So my suspicion is that when you create a wizard, that you get one of these spell lists and then use the spells, one or some number of the spells in those books. Well, as soon as I have a chance, I'll bring a game up here and we'll see how it actually works and share that with you guys. But I'm just not there yet. These are for marking your plot points. You spend these during the game. These are the commodity that allows your activations. And like is typical with any of their box sets, I'm probably going to have to buy more. If you play larger casts, which I often do, usually in the beginning turns, there won't be enough of these to get by. As you go through the game and as you start losing people, you start gaining less plot points, and then it becomes less of an issue. And, if you played smaller casts, they recommend a 25-point cast for this to start with, which is about 6 figures. These are the tokens. Again, they are an MDF, and they are painted. And they're not painted just all one color. You can see they're multicolors. They're just really, really nice. I think it's MDF. It sure looks like it. They've got backs even. They're painted on both sides. All of the boxes come with tokens. They were acrylic in the 7TV one. They've been, I don't have, as I mentioned, Apocalypse, but they've been MDF in the others. But this is the first set that they've been painted in. And these are the nicest tokens that I've seen in any of the packages so far. I don't think they've done this before. This is a quick reference sheet. They've had a page, usually the back of one of the books that has it. But now there's a little separate sheet. It may be because of the magic, because as I mentioned earlier, there is no magic in the basic game, and that's going to add new rules. But that's a really nice feature. I'm glad they did that. And then there's the encounter guide. I sort of hinted at that earlier. I talked about that a little bit earlier. The encounter guide seems to either add complications or other creatures to your game. The game is meant, this is a two-player game. It's not a solo game. You're playing against somebody else, but this brings another force or another event or another danger, sort of another antagonist onto the set, if I should use their terms, onto the set to deal with you. And that's an interesting idea. Again, I haven't really read it. I don't know how it fully works yet, but that is something new to 7TV. Let's go ahead and open these. I can see the trilogy cards are in here, but I know it's going to be more than that because they also have, what do they call them in this game? They have the equivalent of gadget cards. Maybe it's gear. The trilogy cards are what are the countdown cards in Spy-Fi. And what I mean by countdown cards, the game length is based on cards like this. You pull a card the beginning of every turn. Of every player's activation, actually. You'll pull one of these cards, and they're divided into three groups, Act 1, Act 2, and Finale. And they give special events that occur. This one here is continuity error, of course. Choose two friendly, non-extra models and switch their positions without incurring, I'm having hard trouble reading it with these particular glasses. The type, it's smallish type on a dark card. I'm wearing an old pair of glasses right now. That's an example of what these cards do. They'll have a special event, something that changes, and this is where the meta really plays a part, because things like that, continuity error, they're usually things that do not make sense in the reality of the game, in the reality of the event. They're not like in a normal game, something like that might have been a creature wanders in or something moves. There's no, or someone does a spell or a curse that changes their positions. There's no explanation for these things because there isn't supposed to be an explanation because it's actually an error that they made when they edited the film together. It's not something that's actually important to the story, but it can be important to the game. Some of these things move terrain. They also, because they are progressive, because it does go Act 1, 2, and Epilogue, the events tend to get larger and more important and more powerful as you go through the game. In fact, in a police version of the Spy-Fi game, in the Beat, I had a game switch who was winning at the last minute because of a card that caused an explosion. It completely changed the way the game was unfolding. So those are the trilogy cards. Then Artifact. Artifact is their version for gear or gadget are in this game. And some of them are things like there's just an amulet of protection here, but I know from having read something earlier that there's bigger stuff here. Royal Crown. Not that big, though. I think I'm actually thinking of the next deck. The next deck is MacGuffins. MacGuffins are new. I think it was created for the Pulp game, but they're brilliant. The idea of MacGuffin was there before, but in Spy-Fi, you were left to try to guess or decide or determine what to call your MacGuffins. But now you draw a card, and I know Excalibur's in here, Merlin's staff, Medusa's head. These are major events that you can find. And so one of those objectives will turn out, if you use the MacGuffin rules, it's usually a optional rule. The rest of these are the cards themselves, the last thing in the box. And the cards, there's a card, I mentioned earlier, they won't be for specific characters because this is a basic box set. This is going to be the central casting. So if some of the monsters will be fine, like I'm seeing right here, Minotaur. And a Minotaur is a Minotaur is a Minotaur. This may, in fact, all be monsters. The cards give you all of the stats for the creature. They show a picture of one of the, a figure that they use to depict it. It has what weapons and attacks he has. It has his number of health. There's going to be a figure that talks about which genres he can be used in. I read those genres off to you earlier. Each genre has an insignia, and to pick them on a cast, they'll have to match the insignias for that genre. And it has all their stats necessarily. These are villain cards. So Orc Warlord's an example of what I meant. You'd probably name that guy in a game, but this represents a general warlord. There's Goblin Kings, Evil Clerics. So what you do is you pick the figure you want to use, you find the card that is closest to how you describe him. You can either play him the way he is, or you can make those alterations necessary that are in the how to create specific individual characters. As is true with all of their cards, on the back of them, they have most of the rules explaining how to use the card. So again, there's 3 rule books, but you're not really having to use them often as the game unfolds. I don't think I really need to open all of these because they're all going to be basically the same as those. There's some neutrals. There's going to be the random monsters are going to have cards, and then all the possible main characters. So yeah, final thoughts. It's pretty much what I expected it to be because, it is, I have a few of these boxes and I'm used to them. This one weighs more than any of the previous ones. It has a whole lot more high quality and beautiful, attractive things in it than the previous games. They mention in one of the 3 rule books that this was their love is fantasy and this is how they started. And you can tell. To me, what got them started in the game is the Spy-Fi, and I think that's still going to be my favorite of the 7 TV games. But as far as the quality and the look of the products, is without a doubt, this one is the best. And for most of us, it's going to be pretty easy to throw something together we may already have around the house, unless you just don't play fantasy stuff at all. And if I don't, I kind of suspect you didn't just buy this box. The advantage of 7 TV is it doesn't require an awful lot of figures. The only challenge I've ever had with them, and it's because of how I play. I typically am playing 7 TV at conventions with people who have never played the game. And if you're using, like I probably will be for this game, using agnostic figures and those random cards to represent them, then the pictures won't match and it may be confusing to my players. If you're playing at home, that's not an issue at all. You built your cast, you knew what card you were thinking of when you bought this guy. You're also not committed. You could change cards, so that's not really a problem. You can also create cards of your own. There's a number of templates available on the Crooked Dice Facebook page that will help you create your own cards. I don't think there's any that are this, they're the normal Spy-Fi looking cards, but that's not specific. That won't matter. These cards are a different color and a little more attractive again, but that kind of fits the genre. I think this was a good purchase, even though it was expensive. I'm going to get some use out of it. Quality and the merchandise that goes in there makes it, and I can see why it cost the money it did, not except for the shipping, which has nothing to do with Crooked Dice's fault. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to doing it, putting it together. I hope you are interested in it. I'm going to do my best to get a game up here in the relatively near future. I've got a bit of a backlog about to come up. This is turning into a pretty busy month for me as far as merchandise goes. I just got the Lunar Backroom project from Blacksite Studios. I just got that, so I'm working on that. I just got this like a couple days after that. I'm about to receive the newest Kickstarter from Moonstones. I have the Baron's War Death and Taxes. This should be arriving pretty quickly. And I have Brigade Games' French and Indian War, their, what is it? Dark and Bloody Ground, I think it is, the second installment of that. So I'm about to be bombarded with figures and games and things, all of which I'm going to be sharing with you here on Cry Havoc Wargaming, but that's also a bit of a workload coming and going. I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's a little long, I realize, as a box opening. This was like kind of a box opening / review video, but I hope you've enjoyed it. If you play 7 TV, or if you have this product, this didn't just come out, and you have any comments you'd like to make or questions you'd like to ask about it, go ahead and do those in the comments down below. Also, if you have ideas for further content you'd like to see us present here at Cry Havoc Wargaming, we look for the comment section for those as well. If you've enjoyed this video or found it useful, I hope you'll hit like. And if you'd like to continue to receive notifications for videos like this one that might help you decide how to better spend your money or time in your tabletop wargaming hobby, then please hit subscribe and ring our notification bell. Until next time, cheers.